I still remember the exact moment my husband said it. We were sitting at his mother's kitchen table, her enormous granite-topped kitchen table in her enormous house, and she was showing us blueprints. Not blueprints for a garden shed or a deck expansion. Blueprints for a full luxury wellness pavilion, cedar-lined steam room, cold plunge pool, heated marble floors, a relaxation lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking her private garden, and a changing suite with custom cabinetry. The architect's estimate was printed at the bottom of the page in bold black ink, $1 million. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because for a split second I was sure it was some kind of elaborate joke. Diane, my mother-in-law, had always been theatrical. She liked to make entrances, to spread papers across tables and narrate her grand visions like she was pitching investors. I figured this was another one of her performances. But Brad, my husband, was not laughing. He was nodding along, tracing the blueprints with his finger, asking about drainage and permits, and timelines like this was already a done deal. "Mom's been dreaming about this for years," he said. He reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Not a warm squeeze, a squeeze that meant, "Go along with this." "It's my retirement gift to myself," Diane said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smile. 40 years I worked in corporate real estate. 40 years of stress and thankless hours. I think I've earned something beautiful. "That's a lot of money," I said carefully. I was trying to be diplomatic. I was always trying to be diplomatic with Diane. 7 years of marriage had taught me that the wrong word at her table could echo for months. And then Brad said it, casually, without hesitation, without even glancing in my direction. "Don't worry, Mom. Jenna has her own business. She'll pay." The room didn't go silent. That's the thing people never tell you about the worst moments of your life. They don't always come with dramatic pauses. Diane just smiled and nodded like she'd been expecting exactly this. Like it had already been arranged. Like I was the last person in the room to be informed of a decision that had been made without me. "That's so generous, sweetheart," she said. To him, not to me. "My name is Jenna Whitfield. I'm 34 years old. 6 years ago, I started a skincare company from a folding table in my studio apartment. I had $200 in savings and a recipe for a vitamin C serum that I'd spent months perfecting. I hand-poured every bottle. I designed the labels myself. I drove to farmers' markets at 5 in the morning and stood behind my little booth in the rain, the heat, the wind, selling $10 jars to strangers and praying someone would come back for a second one. They did. And then more came. And then a local boutique offered to carry my line. And then an online retailer. And then, slowly, and then all at once, the business grew into something real. Something that brought in 7 figures a year. Something I built with my own hands, my own sleepless nights, my own tears, my own risk. Not Brad's, not Diane's, mine. And now my husband had just promised $1 million of it to his mother, without asking me, without warning me, without so much as a conversation in the car on the way over. He'd sat at that table and offered my life's work like it was loose change in his pocket. I looked at him, waiting for him to turn and meet my eyes, to mouth "sorry" or "we'll talk later," or anything that would tell me this was a misunderstanding. He didn't look at me. He was already discussing foundation materials with the architect's notes, leaning over the blueprints like a man who just closed a deal, and Diane was watching me, not with gratitude, not even with expectation, with something quieter, something I wouldn't fully understand for weeks. She was watching me the way someone watches a door they've been planning to walk through for a very long time. I sat there, my hand still under my husband's grip, and I smiled. Because that's what I'd trained myself to do at that table. Smile. Nod. Be gracious. Be the good wife. But beneath the smile, something sharp had already begun to turn. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I watched every single one of them tick by on the dashboard clock, saying nothing, staring out the passenger window at the suburban streets I used to find so charming. Brad lasted about 8 minutes before the silence got to him. He reached over and turned down the radio. "You're upset," he said. Not a question. A diagnosis. Like I was a patient exhibiting predictable symptoms. "You volunteered $1 million of my money, Brad, without even looking at me. It's not like that." He kept his eyes on the road, his voice steady, reasonable. The same tone he used on sales calls when a client pushed back. "It's our money. We're married." "No, it's my business. I built it before we got married. The accounts are separate. We agreed on that from the start. You know this." He sighed. That sigh. I'd been hearing it more and more over the past 2 years. A slow exhale through the nose, accompanied by a slight shake of the head, like I was being exhausting. Like I was the one making things complicated, like a grown woman asking to be consulted before someone gave away her money was somehow unreasonable. "My mom gave us the down payment for this house," he said. "She gave you $60,000, and I've been paying the mortgage every month since, every single month, Brad." "She's my mother, Jenna, and I'm your wife." He went quiet after that. I thought maybe something had landed. Maybe he'd sit with it overnight, realize how far he'd overstepped, and call Diane in the morning to walk it back. I even rehearsed how I'd respond when he apologized, graciously because that's who I wanted to be. 3 days passed. No apology, no conversation, just Brad going about his routine. Morning coffee, gym, work, dinner in front of the TV. Like nothing had happened. Like $1 million promise was just another Tuesday. And then I found the email. I wasn't snooping. We shared a family desktop in the home office, and Brad had left his inbox open. The subject line caught my eye. Diane Whitfield, Wellness Pavilion Project. I clicked it, and my stomach dropped. Brad had already contacted Diane's architect, not to cancel, not to discuss, to move things forward. He'd sent them my business email address and written in his neat professional tone, "My wife will be handling the financials on this project. Please direct all invoices and cost breakdowns to her at the address below." I read it 3 times. Each time the words felt heavier. He hadn't just ignored my objection. He'd actively bypassed it. He'd gone behind my back, given a stranger my contact information, and positioned me as the funding source for a project I had never agreed to, without a single conversation, without even pretending to include me. I closed the laptop and sat in my office chair for a long time. The house was quiet. Brad was downstairs watching a basketball game. I could hear the muffled sound of commentators and the occasional squeak of sneakers on the court. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of a marriage that was supposed to be working. I called Olivia, my best friend since college, the one person who had never once made me feel like my success was something to apologize for. She picked up on the second ring. "He did what?" she said. "He contacted the architect, gave them my email for billing. It's already in motion, Liv." "Jenna, tell me you're not actually going to pay for this." "Of course I'm not." "Then why do you sound like you've been crying?" Because I had been, quietly with the door closed, while my husband cheered at a 3-pointer 1 floor below me. Not over the money. I could afford the money. That wasn't the point. The point was what the money represented. In 7 years of marriage, I had somehow become invisible. Not as a person. Brad still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still told people at parties that his wife was incredible, but as a partner, as someone whose voice mattered. My opinions were decorative, my consent was assumed, and my earnings were communal, but only in one direction. Brad worked as a regional sales manager. He made a decent salary, but the moment my business crossed into real profitability, something shifted between us. He stopped talking about our future and started talking about what we could afford, where we always meant me. A nicer car, a kitchen renovation, a 2-week trip to Italy that I planned and paid for entirely by myself. And then there was Diane. Always Diane. The comments at Thanksgiving. It must be so nice to have a wife who can handle the finer things. The remarks at Christmas. Brad, you really did marry well, didn't you? As if I was a stock that had outperformed expectations. As if my value was measured in what I could provide for them. I used to brush it off. I told myself she was proud of me in her own way. I told myself Brad was just close with his mother, and that was a good thing. But sitting in that office, staring at an email I was never supposed to see, I understood something clearly for the first time. I wasn't Brad's partner. I was his and Diane's budget line. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure came at me from every angle, steady and deliberate, like water rising in a room with no windows. Diane called me directly. This was unusual. In 7 years, she'd always routed communication through Brad, like I was a department she didn't manage. But now she had my number on speed dial and a project timeline to discuss. "Jenna, honey," she began, her voice warm and unhurried, the voice of a woman who had spent 40 years closing real estate deals and knew exactly how to sound like your best friend while handing you a contract. "I just wanted to go over a few things. The architect says if we break ground by April, we can have everything finished by September. Can you imagine? A gorgeous new space ready just in time for the family to gather at Thanksgiving. Wouldn't that be something?" "Diane, I appreciate the thought, but I really need to sit down with Brad and, Brad and I already went over everything. He told me you two had a long talk and that you were happy to contribute. He said you were excited, actually. That's my boy. He knows how to pick a generous woman." She kept talking about tile samples, about a company in Finland that made custom sauna heaters, about how she'd always envisioned a space where the whole family could come together and decompress. By the time she paused for breath, I realized she'd already hung up emotionally. She wasn't having a conversation with me. She was delivering a briefing. That night, I waited until Brad came upstairs. He was brushing his teeth, casual and relaxed, like a man without a single unresolved conflict in his life. "Your mother called me today," I said from the doorway. "She says you told her I agreed to fund the sauna project." He spat toothpaste into the sink. "I told her we'd figure it out. She probably just filled in the blanks." "No, Brad. She didn't fill in the blanks. She quoted you. She said I was excited. She said you told her we had a long talk about it." He rinsed his mouth slowly, watching himself in the mirror. "I may have softened things a little so she wouldn't worry. You lied, either to her or to me, or to both of us." He turned around, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. That posture. I knew that posture. It was his defensive stance. The one that said, "I'm done explaining myself to you." "Why are you making this such a big deal?" he said. "She's 71 years old. She raised me by herself after Dad left. She wants a sauna. You make more in a quarter than most people make in a year. What is the actual problem here?" I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, something colder. The feeling of watching someone you love reduce everything you've done to a number on a spreadsheet. "The problem," I said, keeping my voice level, "is that you do not get to spend my money without my consent. The problem is that you promised $1 million on my behalf to a woman who lives in a 4,000 square foot house, owns 2 rental properties, and collects a full pension. Diane can build her own sauna, Brad." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what she sacrificed." "I know exactly what she sacrificed. She told me. At every holiday dinner, at every birthday, at every single family gathering for 7 years. I could recite her story from memory. You're being selfish." There it was, the word he knew would cut deepest. Because Brad understood me. That was the cruel part. He knew I grew up watching my mother clip coupons and work double shifts so we could afford school supplies. He knew I'd built my business partly out of fear. Fear of ever being that broke again, but also fear of becoming the kind of person who had money and refused to share it. He knew that selfish was the one accusation I couldn't easily shake off, and he used it like a tool, precisely, without hesitation. I didn't answer him. I walked down the hall, pulled a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet, and went into the guest room. I closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and pressed my palms against my eyes until the stinging stopped. It was the first night I slept apart from my husband. It would not be the last. A week passed in a strange, brittle quiet. Brad and I moved through the house like two people sharing an elevator. Polite, minimal, avoiding eye contact. He didn't bring up the sauna. I didn't bring up the guest room. We ate dinner at the same table and talked about the weather, the grocery list, a leaking faucet in the upstairs bathroom, surface things, safe things. I thought maybe the silence was its own kind of resolution. Maybe he'd realized he'd pushed too far and was quietly backing down. Maybe Diane had moved on to another project, another vision board, another dream that didn't require my bank account. Then I came home from work on a Thursday evening, arms full of product samples from a meeting with a new retailer, and found Diane sitting on my living room sofa. "Surprise," she said, holding up a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, as if she'd been waiting for me to walk through the door so the evening could officially begin. I thought we could celebrate. The architect finalized the designs today. Wait until you see the updated renderings. They added this beautiful skylight over the plunge pool. Brad was standing in the kitchen doorway. He had the look of a man caught between 2 rooms, 2 women, 2 versions of reality, and hoping that if he stayed very still, he wouldn't have to choose. I set my bag down on the floor, slowly, carefully, the way you set things down when you're trying not to break them, or when you're trying not to break yourself. "Diane," I said, "we need to talk." "Of course, honey. Sit down. Let me pour you a glass." "I don't want a glass. I want to be clear about something, and I want to say it directly so there's no room for misunderstanding." I looked at Brad. He looked at the floor. I looked back at Diane. "I am not paying for the sauna." The room changed, not dramatically. There was no gasp, no shattered glass, no theatrical outburst. It was subtler than that. Diane's smile didn't disappear so much as it froze in place, the way a screen freezes right before a system crashes. Her fingers stayed wrapped around the wine bottle, but they stopped moving. Brad stepped forward. "Jenna, maybe we should—" "No. I've tried maybe and later and let's discuss it." None of that worked, so now I'm being direct. I did not agree to this. I was never consulted. Brad volunteered my money without my knowledge or my consent, and I am telling you now, clearly and respectfully, that I will not be writing a check. Not for $1 million, not for 100,000, not for a single dollar, toward a luxury addition to your home. I paused. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. "I care about you, Diane. I've always tried to be a good daughter-in-law, but this is a boundary and I need you to hear it." Diane set the wine bottle down on the coffee table, gently, precisely. And then she looked at me and I saw it. The thing I'd spent 7 years pretending wasn't there. The warmth left her face like heat leaving a room when someone opens a window in January. What was left underneath wasn't sadness or disappointment. It was contempt, pure, undiluted, and very old. "I see," she said. "So this is the kind of wife you are." "Mom," Brad started. "No, Bradley. Let her speak. Let her explain to me why a woman who makes more money in a year than most people see in a decade can't help the mother of the man who gave her everything she has." "Gave me everything?" I repeated. My voice was calm. I was surprised by how calm it was. "You were nobody before Brad. A girl selling creams from a folding table at a weekend market. My son gave you stability. He gave you a home. He gave you a name that opened doors. And this is how you repay his family?" I turned to Brad. He was leaning against the kitchen door frame, staring at a spot on the hardwood floor like it contained the answers to every question he'd ever been afraid to face. "Are you going to say anything?" I asked him. He didn't look up. He ran one hand through his hair, exhaled slowly, and said, I think you two should work this out between yourselves." And then he walked away, down the hall, into the den. I heard the door close and the sound of the television turning on. He left me standing in my own living room, alone with a woman who had just told me I was nothing without her son. And he chose a basketball game. I turned back to Diane. Something inside me, something that had been bending for years, accommodating, adjusting, making room, finally straightened. "I think you should leave," I said. She stood up, smoothed her blouse, picked up the rolled blueprints she'd brought and tucked them under her arm like a general retreating with her battle plans. "Gladly," she said. At the door, she turned and looked at me one final time. "But I want you to know something, Jenna. Brad agrees with me. He always has. You're just the last one to figure it out." The door closed behind her. The house went silent. And I stood there in the middle of the room I'd furnished, in the house I'd paid for, in the life I'd built, and I realized that Diane was right about one thing. I had been the last to figure it out, but I wasn't going to be the last to act. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. I was past crying. I was doing something I should have done a long time ago. I was looking at the numbers. I sat at my desk with a cup of cold coffee and opened every file, every account, every record I'd kept over 7 years of marriage. Bank statements, credit card bills, transfer receipts, mortgage payments. I'm a business owner. Documentation isn't a habit for me, it's a reflex. Every dollar that left my accounts had a timestamp, a purpose, and a destination. And that night, for the first time, I followed every single trail. The mortgage, $3,400 a month for 7 years, paid from my account, every month without exception. Brad had never once transferred his share. In the early years, I told myself it was because his salary was smaller, because it made sense for the higher earner to cover housing. But the truth was simpler. He just never offered, and I never demanded. The cars. Brad drove a luxury SUV. He told me the dealership offered him a great financing deal, but 6 months in, he'd asked me to help out with the payments because interest rates were killing him. I covered the remaining balance, $18,000. Diane's vacations, last year's trip to Turks and Caicos. Brad had framed it as a family getaway, but when I pulled up the booking confirmations, my card was on every reservation. Flights, resort, dining, even the spa package Diane had raved about at Christmas dinner. The golf club membership. The home office renovation, he said, was for both of us, but that only he used. The surprise anniversary dinner he'd planned for Diane's 70th birthday at a restaurant where the tasting menu alone was $300 a person. I added it all up. It took hours. When I was done, I sat back in my chair and stared at the number on my screen. $412,600. That's how much I had poured into Brad's life, Brad's comfort, and Brad's mother's happiness over the course of our marriage. In addition to running a company, employing a staff, paying my own taxes, and building something from nothing, I had also been quietly, steadily funding the Whitfield family lifestyle without anyone ever saying, "Thank you." The next morning, I called my attorney. Her name was Rachel Torres, and she'd handled my business incorporation years ago. She was sharp, thorough, and she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I want to understand my options," I said. Rachel explained that because my business was established before the marriage and maintained in separate accounts, it was classified as separate property under our state's laws. Brad had no legal claim to my company, my earnings, or my business assets. The house was more complicated. It was technically jointly owned. But the fact that I had paid the entire mortgage from my personal account created a strong evidentiary trail. "Have you been keeping records?" she asked. "Every receipt, every transfer, every payment." "Good. Then you're in a much stronger position than most people who walk into my office." That afternoon, Olivia came over. She brought wine and something else, a truth she'd been carrying for longer than I realized. "I need to tell you something," she said, settling onto the couch, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond." "Okay." "I've been watching this for years, Jenna. The way Brad talks about your money like it's a shared resource, but his salary is untouchable. The way Diane treats you like an investor instead of a daughter-in-law. I noticed it at your wedding, honestly." The toast she gave was all about how Brad had found someone who could really take care of the family. I thought I was reading too much into it, but then it kept happening. She paused, took a breath. "Last month, I did something. I looked into Diane's property records. They're public. You can find them online. Her house is paid off. No mortgage. She owns it free and clear. And those 2 rental properties Brad always talks about like they're some modest side income, they bring in $8,000 a month combined. She also has a full pension from her corporate career, plus Social Security." I stared at her. "Jenna, Diane isn't struggling. She's not some retired widow scraping by. She could build that sauna out of her own pocket and still have money left over for a second one." The room tilted. Not physically, but something in my understanding shifted, and suddenly everything I'd been looking at from the wrong angle snapped into focus. This was never about a sauna. It was never about a retirement gift or a family gathering space or a dream deferred. It was about establishing a pattern, about Diane planting the flag that said, "Her money is our money," and about Brad holding the flagpole. I moved out on a Tuesday. I chose the timing carefully. Brad was at work. Diane was at her Tuesday morning Pilates class. The house was empty and quiet, and I moved through it with the kind of focused calm that comes when you've already made peace with a decision. I didn't take the furniture. I didn't take the artwork I'd chosen for the walls or the hand-woven rug I'd found at an estate sale that Brad used to complain was too expensive for a hallway. I didn't take the kitchen appliances or the garden tools or the throw pillows I'd arranged on the guest bed. I took my clothes, my documents, my laptop, and the framed photograph of my mother that had sat on my desk since the day I moved in. My mother, 26 years old in the picture, standing behind the counter of the bakery where she worked double shifts so I could have new shoes for school. She was smiling. She was exhausted. She was everything I never wanted to become and everything I hoped to honor. On the kitchen counter, I left a single envelope. Inside was a document my attorney had prepared, a detailed, itemized accounting of every dollar I had paid toward Brad's life, Brad's family, and Brad's mother's comfort over the course of our marriage. Every mortgage payment, every car loan installment, every vacation I funded, every dinner, every gift, every quiet act of generosity that had been received without acknowledgement and expected without gratitude. At the bottom of the last page, printed in clean black type, total contributions made by Jenna Whitfield on behalf of the Whitfield family, $412,600. This document is provided for reference in upcoming legal proceedings. Brad called me 47 times that day. I know because I watched each notification appear on my phone while I sat in Olivia's guest room, drinking tea and feeling, for the first time in years, like I could breathe without asking permission. I answered once. Just once. "Jenna, you can't do this. Come home. We'll figure it out. We're a team." We were never a team, Brad. I was the team. You were a spectator who occasionally clapped. My mom is devastated. She's been crying all day. Your mother has a paid-off house, $8,000 a month in rental income, and a full pension. She's going to be fine. What about us? I paused, and in that pause, I felt the full weight of 7 years. The early mornings and late nights, the trade shows and product launches, the moments of doubt when I almost gave up, the pride when I didn't. All the times I bit my tongue at Diane's table, all the times I wrote a check and told myself it was love, all the times Brad squeezed my hand and I thought it meant partnership. There was a version of me, a younger, more frightened version, who would have turned around, who would have driven back to that house and sat at that kitchen table and smiled while Diane unrolled her blueprints. Who would have written the check because the cost of saying no felt higher than the cost of $1 million? But that version of me was gone. She'd been gone since the night I added up 400,000 reasons to leave. There is no us, Brad. There's me. And there's the life I built with my own hands, and I'm taking it with me. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. My attorney was worth every penny. I kept my business, my accounts, and my name. Brad got the house, along with a mortgage he couldn't cover on his sales manager's salary without my monthly transfers. Last I heard, he'd listed it for sale. And Diane? Diane never got her $1 million wellness pavilion. According to Brad's cousin, who still kept in touch with Olivia, she eventually converted her guest bedroom into what she called a relaxation space. Portable steam unit, LED candles, a sound machine that played forest noises. Total cost, about $500. And somehow, the world kept spinning. As for me, I bought my own place. Not big, not flashy. A 2-bedroom cottage with white walls, wide windows, and a small garden where I planted lavender and rosemary, ingredients I still use in my products. The first night there, I ran a hot bath, lit a candle I'd made myself, and sat in the quiet. No blueprints, no invoices, no kitchen table where my worth was measured in what I could give away. Just silence, just peace, just mine. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't owe a single person a single thing.